My name's Daniel. I'm 38, and I live in Bloomington, Indiana. And if you asked me last year what my biggest flaw was, I would have said something like being too eager to please. Funny how life has a way of cracking that open like an egg on hot pavement. See, I got married last summer. Small wedding, backyard ceremony, barefoot in the grass, the whole cliché. But it was ours, and for once, I thought I'd done something right without asking for permission or approval. I didn't realize that my parents, who'd always held my sister Anna up like she was a saint on a pedestal, wouldn't even show up. Anna, the golden child, the overachiever, the girl who made straight A's, captained the debate team, got into Yale, and now runs her own nonprofit saving sea turtles or curing world hunger, depending on which glowing Facebook post you read that day. Me? I was the quirky kid, the one who struggled with his weight, fumbled through community college, started a landscaping business, and married a woman my parents never quite approved of. The first sign of trouble came 6 months before the wedding. I remember sitting in their kitchen, all hopeful and naive, telling them about the date we'd picked. My mother's face fell just slightly, like a flicker across a stormy sky. "Oh, sweetheart, but Anna hasn't even met anyone yet," she murmured, as if I'd just confessed to murder. I laughed it off then. But looking back, it was the first crack in a dam I didn't know was about to break. The months leading up to the wedding were a masterclass in subtle sabotage. At first, it was small things, my mother forgetting to RSVP, my father losing track of the wedding date. Anna, of course, was so happy for us, but somehow too busy with a grant proposal in Belize or a summit in DC to even meet my fiancée, Julia. I kept excusing it. Told Julia they were just busy, that they'd come around. After all, I was their son. I had this naive belief that blood meant something, that family would show up when it counted. But family, I was learning, is a contract written in invisible ink, only visible when you shine the right kind of light on it. And sometimes, it disappears completely. The week before the wedding, it became undeniable. My mom called, her voice syrupy sweet, the kind she used when she wanted to slip a dagger between your ribs. "Honey, I just don't think we should overshadow Anna's future wedding by making such a big deal of yours. You understand, don't you?" My fingers tightened around the phone. I felt like a child again, standing in the shadow of Anna's sun, burning my eyes just trying to get a little warmth. Julia saw it before I did. She'd gently tell me that maybe, just maybe, my parents weren't going to change. That maybe, we were building something better without their blessing. I wanted so badly to believe otherwise. But the day came. The sun hung low over the Indiana hills, the grass smelled of summer rain, and friends gathered under white string lights in our backyard. Chairs were mismatched, the cake was from a local bakery, the music was a Spotify playlist. It was perfect, except for the 2 glaringly empty chairs in the front row. That night, after everyone left, I sat on the porch with Julia's hand in mine and stared out into the dark. It should have hurt more. It should have broken me. But something surprising bubbled up instead, a quiet, burning clarity. I was free. Free from the loop of approval seeking, free from the ache of waiting for them to see me. And in that space, surrounded by the people who had chosen to love us, I realized I didn't need to be chosen by them. After the wedding, the silence from my parents was deafening. A week passed, then 2. No call, no card, no, sorry we couldn't make it. Nothing. I sent a few tentative texts, photos from the wedding, a simple thinking of you, met with red receipts and no replies. At first, I convinced myself they were just giving me space. But the space kept stretching, pulling taut like a wire between us, until it finally snapped. 3 weeks after the wedding, Julia and I went to dinner downtown. A cozy Italian place we loved, tucked between a bookstore and a florist. As we waited for dessert, Julia's phone lit up with a news notification. Her eyes widened, lips parting slightly. "You should see this," she murmured, sliding the phone to me. There on the screen was a smiling photo of Anna, standing beside her fiancé, a clean-cut lawyer from Chicago, under a headline. Local hero Anna Morrison announces engagement, plans lavish spring wedding. My stomach dropped. I hadn't known. My parents hadn't told me. Anna hadn't told me. The world knew before I did. I sat there, my fork hovering over tiramisu I suddenly had no appetite for, while Julia watched me carefully. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. I wanted to laugh. Okay. I'd just been erased. My wedding was a minor prelude to the grand event they were really waiting for. I waited until the next morning to call my mother. She picked up on the second ring, her voice bright, too bright. "Danny, so good to hear from you." I asked her, as calmly as I could, why they hadn't told me. She gushed about how busy they were, how fast everything happened, how Anna was finally getting her moment, and didn't I want to be supportive? Didn't I want to be happy for her? That was the moment something in me hardened. Not anger exactly. I'd been angry before. This was different. It was the quiet, grim understanding that I was never going to be enough for them. That I could win marathons or medals or run for governor, and Anna would still shine just a little brighter in their eyes. Later that week, I got an invitation in the mail. An embossed card with gold trim, Anna and Peter's smiling faces stamped in the corner. I held it in my hands for a long time. Julia found me like that, standing in the kitchen, the card heavy in my fingers. She asked if I was going. I shook my head slowly, feeling the weight fall off me like an old coat I no longer wanted to carry. No, I said quietly. I think I've celebrated enough weddings for this family. The weeks that followed were strange, a mix of freedom and grief I hadn't expected. Julia watched me closely, as if waiting for the dam to break, but I didn't cry, didn't rage. I worked longer hours in my landscaping business, poured myself into the fall cleanup season, raked leaves until my shoulders ached. It was easier to shovel mulch and trim hedges than to sit still and feel everything unraveling inside me. Anna's wedding photos were everywhere, Facebook, Instagram, even in the local paper. My mother emailed me a link, like she was offering an olive branch, though it felt more like a slap. There was Anna, radiant in white, Peter smiling like a man who just won the lottery, and my parents beaming as if they'd been waiting their whole lives for this moment. I wasn't even in the family photos. I hadn't been invited to stand in the frame. But life has a strange sense of timing. 2 months after Anna's wedding, the cracks started showing. Julia and I were out walking when she got a text from a mutual friend. Apparently, Peter's family was less enchanted with Anna than my parents had been. Rumors floated back to town. The in-laws were pulling away, murmuring about Anna's high demands, her need to be the center of attention, her restlessness. It was as if I was watching a house I'd been exiled from slowly sink into the sand. And for the first time, I didn't want to rush in and hold up the walls. Around that time, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. The next day, she left another, her voice thinner now, a nervous edge under the syrup. Danny, can we talk? Things have been complicated lately. That word again, complicated. The family's favorite weapon when they didn't want to admit failure. Julia found me in the garage that night, sitting on an overturned bucket, just staring at the cement floor. She wrapped her arms around me from behind, rested her chin on my shoulder. You don't owe them anything, she whispered. And for the first time, I believed it. For most of my life, I thought love was something I had to earn, something you scraped for like loose change under the couch cushions. But standing there in the quiet, feeling Julia's arms around me, I understood that real love doesn't come with a ledger. So when my phone buzzed again and I saw my mother's name, I turned it face down on the workbench. Let them call. Let them figure out how to live in the house they built. Thanksgiving came, and with it, the predictable invitation, or maybe more accurately, the summons. My mother left a voicemail, bright and chirpy, as if the months of silence and missed weddings had been a technical glitch, a minor hiccup. We're hosting this year. Just the family, nice and small. Anna and Peter will be there, of course. We'd love to see you, and Julia. Hope you can make it. Julia watched me as I listened, her brow furrowing when she saw the stiffness in my jaw. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the pull of obligation. I didn't feel the panic itch to smooth things over, to show up and prove I was still a good son, a good brother. Instead, I felt something lighter, almost like defiance, but softer. Maybe it was peace. I looked at Julia and said, let's go to Nashville. She blinked, surprised. Just us, I added. We can eat barbecue and drink too much coffee and listen to music until midnight. The smile that spread across her face was the kind of smile that makes you wonder why you ever spent so much time chasing people who barely looked your way. We spent Thanksgiving walking through streets lined with twinkling lights, eating pecan pie in a hole-in-the-wall diner, and dancing, clumsy and laughing, to a band we'd never heard of in a bar where no one knew our names. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like the main character in my own life. But the universe wasn't quite done testing me. 2 days after we got home, my father called. My father, who barely texted, much less called. I stared at the screen, heart thudding, before answering. His voice was quiet. Tired. Danny, we need to talk. The words tumbled out in a rush. Anna and Peter were separated. It hadn't even been 6 months. There were fights, blame, money arguments, and now Anna was back home, crying in her childhood bedroom. My father's voice cracked, something I hadn't heard since I was a teenager. Your mother, she's taking this hard. Anna, she's not doing well. We could use your support. I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed, phone pressed to my ear. And here it was, the test. The moment I'd waited for all my life, when the golden child fell off the pedestal and they turned to the backup plan. To me, I realized, with a strange, sad clarity, that I didn't want their approval anymore. I didn't need to be the one who fixed it. When Julia came into the room and saw my face, she sat beside me quietly, waiting. I met her eyes, and for the first time in years, I said the words I didn't know I had the right to say. I think they need to figure this out without me. I didn't return the call that night, or the next. A week passed, then another. My father's call slowed. My mother switched to texting, each message shorter, more brittle. "We miss you. Anna's asking for you. Please call." Julia noticed I was quieter, but not in the way I used to be, not sullen, not wounded. More like someone adjusting to the idea that they were finally off the hook. One evening, after dinner, Julia reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. "You know," she said softly, "you've been carrying them for a long time." She paused, searching my face. Maybe it's their turn to carry themselves. The words hit me harder than I expected, because she was right. For most of my life, I'd been the emotional workhorse, the one who smoothed things over, bridged the gaps, picked up the pieces. It was exhausting, invisible work. And the truth was, no one had ever asked me to do it. I just volunteered, because I thought that was how you kept love. But now, as Anna's perfect image cracked and my parents' golden vision crumbled, I realized they weren't reaching out because they wanted me. They wanted the fixer. And that was no longer a role I was willing to play. A few days later, an envelope arrived, thick, ivory, embossed with gold. Anna's formal separation announcement. A glossy photo of her, looking heartbreakingly fragile in a black turtleneck, and a carefully worded letter thanking everyone for their understanding during this difficult transition. I laughed when I opened it. Not cruelly. More like the laugh you let out when the last piece of the puzzle clicks into place and you realize the picture was upside down all along. Julia came to stand behind me, resting her chin on my shoulder as we both looked down at the card. "What now?" she murmured. I turned, pulling her into my arms, and for once, I had an answer that felt like it came from my own chest, not theirs. "Now," I said, "we live." Winter settled in early that year, with the kind of gray skies that pressed down on the town like a heavy blanket. But inside our home, something had softened. Julia and I decorated a modest Christmas tree, strung lights across the windows, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for a phone call to pull me back into the old chaos. We played music, made spice cider, and I caught myself laughing without any of that edge in my chest, the one that used to whisper, "You should be somewhere else. You should be doing more." Then, right before Christmas, the unexpected arrived. It wasn't a call or a card. It was Anna. She showed up on our doorstep, bundled in a coat too thin for the weather, her face pale and drawn. I almost didn't recognize her, not because of the tired eyes or the messy hair, but because for the first time in my life, Anna didn't look untouchable. I stood frozen in the doorway, Julia at my shoulder, as Anna shuffled her feet on the porch. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice small. The three of us sat at the kitchen table, steam curling from mugs of coffee, and for a long time, no one spoke. Anna traced her finger along the rim of her cup, her nails chipped, her shoulders tense. "Finally," she said, "I thought I had everything figured out." She didn't elaborate. She didn't have to. For a moment, the old muscle memory kicked in, the urge to rush in, to comfort, to fix. But then I caught Julia's eye across the table, and I stopped. Instead, I simply said, "Yeah," and let the silence stretch. Anna's eyes filled, her chin trembling, and she nodded, wiping her cheeks with the sleeve of her coat. "I was awful to you," she whispered. "It should have felt like victory. It should have felt like the apology I'd waited for all my life. But instead, all I felt was a strange, soft grief for both of us, two grown-up kids trying to survive the roles we were cast in." I reached across the table and wrapped my fingers around hers, light as a feather. And for the first time, there wasn't a winner or a loser, just two siblings sitting in the ruins of the old script, trying to figure out how to rewrite it. In the days after Anna's visit, the house felt different, like we had cracked open a window that had been painted shut for years. She didn't stay long. Just one night, sleeping on our couch under an old quilt Julia's grandmother had made. In the morning, she sat quietly in the kitchen, hair unbrushed, eyes puffy, cradling a mug like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She didn't apologize again. She didn't have to. When she left, we stood on the porch, our breath ghosting in the cold air. She hugged Julia first, her arms tight, and then turned to me. For a moment, we both hesitated, the old stiffness still there, the residue of years where, "I'm proud of you," or "I love you" had been foreign currency between us. But then she leaned in, rested her forehead against mine, and whispered, "Thank you." I watched her drive away, her little car disappearing down the street, and I realized something I never expected. I wanted her to be okay. Not for our parents, not for the family image, just for her. For the girl who had been crowned the golden child before she even had a chance to decide who she wanted to be. Later that evening, my phone rang. It was my mother. I let it ring, and this time, Julia didn't look at me with worry. She just came to sit beside me on the couch, our legs pressed together under the blanket. The voicemail came through a minute later. My mother's voice was thin, tremulous. "Danny, we're so grateful you were there for Anna. Please call when you can. We miss you." I closed my eyes and leaned my head back against the couch. There was a time when that message would have sent me flying into action, racing to be the son they wanted. But now, it was just a message. Just words. When I opened my eyes, Julia was watching me, her expression calm, steady. "You okay?" she asked. And for the first time, maybe in my entire life, I realized I was. Not because the family was fixed. Not because the past had been rewritten. But because I had finally stepped out of the role I was never meant to carry, and into the life I had chosen for myself. A few weeks slipped by, and winter dug in deeper, the kind of cold that rattled the windows and froze the world into stillness. Julia and I fell into a quiet routine: morning coffee, long bundled walks, evenings spent by the fire, sometimes in conversation, sometimes in a silence that felt like home. Then one Sunday afternoon, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I half expected Anna again, or maybe my parents, driven at last by the weight of their unraveling image. But instead, it was my father. He stood on the porch, his hands shoved deep in the pockets of his coat, his eyes slightly red-rimmed, as if he'd been debating the drive the whole way here. For a long beat, we just stared at each other. "I was out for a drive," he said, though the 20-mile trip suggested otherwise. I stepped aside. He came in slowly, looking around like he was cataloging the life I had built, the mismatched furniture, the photos of Julia and me hiking, the little signs of a home that was not defined by approval or appearance. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Anna had sat weeks before. My father wrapped his hands around his coffee mug like it was an anchor. His eyes flicked to mine, then away. "I think," he said quietly, "we might have failed you." I felt the breath catch in my chest. Not because I needed to hear it. I didn't, not anymore, but because I knew what it had cost him to say it. He stared into his coffee. "We kept waiting for Anna to figure it all out, and I guess we didn't see that you already had." There was no dramatic apology, no sweeping confession. Just a man sitting in the quiet reckoning of his own mistakes. I could have lashed out. I could have pointed to the years of invisibility, the birthdays missed, the milestones ignored, the way I had been folded into the backdrop of the family portrait. But I didn't, because something in me had shifted. Instead, I said, "I'm glad you came." And I meant it. When he left, the air in the house felt warmer somehow, like a door had been cracked open to let in something fragile but real. Julia came to stand beside me at the window as we watched his car disappear down the street. "Did it help?" she asked. I thought about it for a long moment. Then I smiled, small but true. "Yeah," I said softly. "Yeah, it did." As winter melted into early spring, I found myself reflecting more, not just on Anna or my parents, but on the shape of my own life. The house was small, the kind of place people drove past without a second glance, but it was ours. There were still weeds in the garden I hadn't pulled, still a crack in the porch step that needed fixing, but every flaw felt like part of the story we were writing. Anna called occasionally now, short, tentative conversations that didn't pretend to erase the past, but felt like cautious steps forward. She didn't talk much about Peter or the marriage that had collapsed under the weight of all those carefully staged photos and holiday cards. She talked about little things, the job she was easing back into, a new apartment she was considering, the books she'd finally made time to read. And my parents? They were quieter now, less present in that suffocating way, as if they, too, were learning how to live without the crutch of image. One afternoon, as I was pruning the bushes out front, I caught Julia watching me from the porch, a book in her lap, sunlight in her hair. There was a peace in that moment so sharp it almost hurt. When I came to sit beside her, she leaned her head on my shoulder without a word. "Do you think they'll ever change?" I asked quietly. She was silent for a long time before answering. "Maybe," she said at last. "But that's not the question, is it?" I exhaled, feeling the truth of that settle into my chest. It wasn't about whether they would change. It was about whether I would keep waiting for them to. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table and pulled out an old box of photos. There were pictures from childhood, Anna in a Halloween costume, me with a gap-toothed grin, our parents younger, smiling wide, the glow of possibility still in their eyes. I felt a pang, a bittersweet pull, but no bitterness. Just the quiet ache of a man who had outgrown the need for old battles. Julia came to stand behind me, wrapping her arms around my shoulders. "Hey," she murmured into my ear. "Come to bed." I closed the box, took one last glance at the frozen smiles inside, and then rose, leaving it behind on the table. That night, as I lay beside Julia, her breath warm against my skin, I understood something simple and profound. We can't choose the family we're born into, but we can choose the one we build.